Welcome to the Strong.Sistas first episode of our Rooted in Resilience podcast. How excited are you to be here?
This has been a long time coming. We've definitely had some audio challenges and setup challenges, but I'm so excited to be sitting across the table from you.
It's really weird. It's like, I don't know if I look at you or I should look down. I'm nervous in your presence.
Stare at me in the eyeballs.
It's so different. Okay.
So this is episode 1. And we sat down and talked about what we wanted to do for this episode because I wanted to give like a health history and where we are today, how we got there. And Sarah was like, that's boring.
It's so annoying to me because I feel like we've done that on everybody else's podcast. They're always like, walk me through your life. But then Ashley's like, well, that's not on our podcast. So she wants to look back and count this as episode number 1. So
Sarah came up with a good idea. To make it fun.
Okay, so in this episode, we're both going to go over, like we took some notes beforehand secretly, and we're going to go over the 5 most significant life events or circumstances one experienced that's brought them to where they are today.
Yeah, like the 5 most influential events that have really shaped our food philosophy and how we view health. But here's the kicker. I have no idea what 5 things Sarah wrote down. And she has no idea what 5 things I wrote down. So I have it on a piece of paper right here.
Okay, yeah. Mine's like folded.
And so we're going to do one by one, and then we'll comment back and forth on each other.
Yeah, I think that this will paint a good picture.
Yeah.
And then from there, it will make sense what we talk about in future episodes.
Okay, so before we dive into these 5 things, Sarah, who are we and what do we do?
Okay, we are the Strong.Sistas, and that name has stemmed from our last name, Armstrong. So I'm Sarah, and that's my sister, Ashley Armstrong. I'm pointing as if they can see you, but I guess if they're watching the video. And we post a lot of health-related content online, so on our Instagram, but simultaneously we are starting a farm. So we're first-generation farmers at Angel Acres.
Reppin' Angel Acres right here, my hoodie.
So we kind of dabble in the farming. We are super interested in health and all things health related. And that's just stemming from our own experiences, which we'll go over. And we honestly love sharing all of this information with others. So the connection between farming and knowing where your food comes from, and then also your health. So that's kind of a really broad overview, I'd say, of who we are.
Yeah. And we've definitely dabbled with a lot of fad diets along the way of our health journey. I would say that how we have defined the word health has changed a lot in the last 15 years. And it's really nice to finally be at a more like holistic, physiology-based, long-term place where we are rooted in resilience.
Yeah, but you're fast forwarding. I feel like we need to go.
Okay, Sarah wants to get to the 5 list.
Okay, I am going to start with you. What is your first influential event that has shaped who you are?
Okay, so the first thing that I wrote down was 1, velocity sports performance. So this was like a sports performance clinic where young athletes could come and train, like work out, learn about like nutrition and trying to be the best athlete that they could be at a young age. So I went to Velocity Sports Performance at age 14. And at the time I was playing soccer and golf seriously. And so I came into this like group as like an individual, right? And trying to maximize my athleticism, which reflecting back like age 14, that shouldn't be the focus. But I think that going to this clinic is really where I developed orthorexia at such a young age too. So I became obsessed with eating clean. And I vividly remember learning about the Harvard food pyramid. And so like at age 14, that's what I was exposed to as healthy. So, whole grains only. So whole wheat pasta, whole wheat bread, like white rice and white bread was like toxic and poisonous. Very minimal red meat, if any, very much chicken breast and fish, low fat, and all the vegetables that you would possibly want. So it's really unfortunate that that image of health was imprinted in my brain at age 14. So yeah, that was my first major life event that set me down a really unfortunate path at such a foundational developmental stage of my life. Like that's adolescence, where I'm supposed to be developing hormones.
No,
And
you're developing very important skills in your sport.
So yeah, I actually I got one period at that age. And then, as many of you all know, a number of years of amenorrhea after that. So yeah, that was my first life event.
It's so interesting that it's about a performance facility, but the only thing that you took from it was like the nutritional concepts. But I feel like they had to have been kind of pushing you pretty hard in your training too. That would have impacted your health.
That's a great point. I would say that's where my over exercising definitely developed as well. So just this obsession with performance at such a young age, rather than like living and nourishing for health and life, it was like maximizing performance and eating, quote, clean for sport.
Yeah, wow. And I feel like that also shaped your perception and execution of rest and relaxation, because you probably didn't do that at all.
Like no, like rest and recovery was not really a main focus of this. Yeah.
Wow. That's so, it's too much.
I know.
It's too much. Like my daughters in the future will not.
Yeah. Velocity Sports Performance. We can just cross that.
Is that like just a commercial training facility, like a gym?
Yeah, and you can kind of go for any sport, I think.
Okay, so it's like it's grooming young athletes.
100%.
I'm sure there's a lot of iterations of Velocity Sports Performance these days. Yeah. And I feel like that's like entirely the parent pushing something on the child, too. Not that mother and father did that for you, because I'm sure part of you was like, I really want to be the best at golf and soccer. But I feel like for the majority, if somebody's going to be sent to something like that, it's probably like the parent wanting this child to get a scholarship or like a mutual thing, but just this heavy emphasis on like improving and excelling at the performance of the sport as opposed to like developmental and hormonal growth and stuff.
Yeah, like my two role models at that point in life were Mia Hamm, who was like a really good soccer player, professional soccer player. And I think it was Christy Kerr, like a female golfer. So those were like my two idols. So like sports.
When I think about them, I feel like both of those women are like womanly. Like I don't feel like either of them were super thin or anything.
Oh no, they like properly developed as adolescents.
Yeah, because I feel like they didn't go to Velocity Sports Performance at age 14.
Probably not.
So maybe they were already past their developmental stage when they got super into sports. I'm not sure.
I think before we wrap up Velocity Sports Performance, I think it's super important to walk away realizing that one of my take-home points was not the importance of hormones and the importance of having proper hormones in a menstrual cycle in not only overall health, but also in sports performance, right? Like that wasn't discussed.
Oh, that's such a good point. Even just like the ability to put on muscle.
Exactly.
Is largely dictated by your hormones.
Yeah.
So, wow. Well, I know that amenorrhea is so common in female athletes, so I almost feel like it's just accepted and maybe they just get put on the pill, and that's something that we deal with later on.
Yeah. And I want to clarify, I don't think that sports are bad at all. I just think there should be a lot more focus on the hormonal piece, properly nourishing oneself, and the discussion of rest and recovery.
Definitely.
Okay.
Wow.
All right. What is Sarah's number one?
Mine is very similar to yours. I just wrote Fitspo culture in the 2012 to 2014 era. I remember that's when I first got on Instagram and seeing all these different like fitness athletes, if you know what I'm talking about, like
bodybuilders.
Yes. So seeing these really lean females with curves and muscles and seeing their lifestyle or what they show on Instagram. So like the foods they're eating and their training, and just being like, wow, like I want to look like that because, you know, they look great. They've got curves and stuff. But little me at like age 14 or 16 didn't really understand that they spent years building muscle to get there. So if I just diet and get really lean, I'm just going to be a skeleton. So seeing what they look like, not having a good grasp on what it took to get to that place, and then kind of just entering into the eating disorder era where I want to be super lean and ripped like them, but I didn't earn that because I haven't put on muscle, I haven't put on strength. And I mean, gosh, same with you, just didn't go through my puberty all the way. So just already right off the bat, kind of entering like a low-grade starvation for the next several years.
Arguably the most important years of one's life.
Yeah, which is why I wrote this down as one of the 5 most influential things, because even though we're both way past this stage of having an eating disorder and starving ourselves, we did so at such an important part of our journey that it has to have, you know, lasting impact where we are now still.
Yeah.
It's still having to go through the journey now of maybe experiencing these hormonal shifts that we should have had at like 16. And here I am, 26, you know, finally being like, oh, I ovulated or something. So that shaped a lot of my life, I can only imagine. And I'm not going to go into depth about the eating disorder, but basically anorexia and bulimia. And in many ways, this has shaped the way that I view food today. But I would say that it's a good thing that I went through that, just because I can kind of grasp what's happening in social media today, where like females see these different accounts and these different bodies, and then they start mimicking how this person's eating, or they want to change their body to look like that. So I can kind of empathize with what that's like, but at the same time, obviously, it just happens at such tragic moments in young girls' lives where they need to really develop, but instead we're starving ourselves of the nutrients that's needed to not only just have health, but actually achieve the body that we wanted. I didn't even give myself a chance to look like those fitness models, because maybe had I trained hard, but I ate enough, like you were saying, one could have built muscle and sustained a period, but instead just went right into being small and dieting and, starving myself. So
it's so interesting because I think we went through very similar things, but at different time periods and from different influences. So for context, I'm about 3.5 years older than Sarah, and we both went through these at similar ages in our life, but they were staggered a little bit. And yours, I think the most important thing is social media doesn't allow for a convenient way for someone to explain their context. And so you just see snapshots. And so you think like, okay, this person is here because of this, and you aren't able to see their last 10 years. And so you seen that at age 14, it's like, oh, all I have to do is diet. Like my muscles will just poof, magically show. Yeah. I have a very vivid memory of watching Sarah take a backward or a flex photo from behind. So she set up a timer of her back muscle progress, and us like reflecting back on that photo like 10 years later, being like, honey boo, you just needed to build more muscle, spend more time building up, not breaking down.
But at the same time, I also look at that photo like as my 26-year-old self, and I'm like, wow, you looked great. You had some muscle, like you were doing the best you could. But when I was in that moment, I looked at that photo and I was like, oh my God, I hate what I look like. I need more muscle, but at the same time, I need to be leaner. It's just, we spend so much time breaking ourselves down. But if, we would just know that it's all part of the journey.
Yeah.
Then I feel like maybe we would have a different perspective, but that's so hard to grasp as a teenager.
But I think the commonality is there was no understanding of human physiology, proper nourishment, and that came at a loss for us.
That's going to be the trend of the next 4 points too. So
yeah.
What's your second most influential event?
Okay, moving on to number 2. I wrote golf and college athletics. So clearly I was very obsessed with performance at a very young age. And then I received a scholarship and played golf in college. And I know people look down upon golf as like, that's not really a sport. But if you reflect on it, you play 18 holes or 36 holes in one day. So that's a time span of 4 or 8 to 9 hours walking with a golf bag. So carrying, 30 pounds on your back.
A medium-sized dog.
Carrying a medium-sized dog on your back, walking all those holes. We don't get a golf cart when we're playing for college athletics. And so, again, a very important time of my life where I just expended a lot of calories. Like I just burned a lot of calories and
did not eat them back.
No, I never had anorexia or bulimia, but like a common trend of my life was over exercising and under eating. So not eating enough, like always being below the calories that I probably required. And so constantly in a slight caloric deficit, just kind of overworking myself and combining that with like engineering in college. I just burned glycogen. I was just burning glycogen in my brain, on the golf course. And yeah, so I think it just kind of extended the challenges that I had in adolescence through college.
Mind you, hormonally, you are still an adolescent.
I never gave my body the time to like develop into a woman because I was so focused on this performance and achieving success. And now, like, there were definitely a lot of positives. Like, this time period definitely developed my work ethic, but at what cost? You know?
Yeah. And I know you say that you didn't have an eating disorder, but I think, well, I know you had orthorexia. And
Correct.
So
that is a form.
Makes it very easy to be like this, or have this low grade anorexia.
Exactly.
Because you're
behind the scenes, hidden.
Because you're not like skeleton, but you're super thin, always eating in that calorie deficit. And you know, I feel like if you had the understanding of what it takes and how important it is to allow your body to go through the process of becoming a woman, we wouldn't have had that fear of fat.
Nope.
Or we wouldn't have eaten in such a tiny deficit for that long, because we would have understood the implications of what that's going to do to our metabolism and our health and everything that we actually really care about, like performance long term. So again, it's just rooted in ignorance.
100%. No, 100%.
Yeah. But because you were never educated about this.
So basically, I wanted to include this number 2 is because at age 14 at Velocity Sports Performance, I dug myself into a hole, but then I just kept digging. So I'm in this really big hole. And guess what? Later, guys, I just keep digging. So you'll have to figure out what my next couples are. I'm still going down.
You're still going down. So I remember, okay, because this is where we were becoming friends at this point. You had passed your party stage in college.
Yep.
So she dug, and then she poured alcohol in, and then now she's digging some more. But you finally were over the partying, and you were like getting serious about the gym.
Yeah.
And I remember that's when we became friends.
Yep.
Because I was so into that, like
fitness.
I talked about the Fitspo, in high school.
Guys, Sarah was like OG Instagram fitness.
You'd be like, oh, she must have like so much muscle or something that she's following. But I just, similarly to you, just dug myself into this
kept
hole.
making mistakes.
Yeah. But I remember you were at the gym in college at like 5 p.m. or something. And you're getting your like second workout in because you had training at 5 a.m. for golf. But it wasn't the training that you wanted to do exactly. So then you go through your day, your studies, you probably played 18 holes of golf. And then you had bodybuilding training at 5 p.m. And I'm thinking to myself, like, wow, she's so dedicated. But now I'm thinking to myself, like, all she had in between that was probably like 0 fat animal crackers and a protein shake, chicken breasts, and steamed broccoli.
Yeah.
And my gosh, she's still going.
Yeah. So I like over-exercised, but then I also didn't eat enough. And then the food that I did eat, like 0 fat, whole grains, never had liver, never consumed retinol. So I was missing a lot of key nutrients. Always ate enough protein, but never enough energy and really micronutrient rich foods. No fat soluble vitamins and animal fats. Yeah. So
wow,
we're still digging. I'm still in my hole.
Mm-hmm.
What's your number 2?
My number 2 is sort of the start of digging out of like at least an energy deficit, sort of. But my number 2 is entering the If It Fits Your Macros powerlifting stage of our journey. And I think there's a lot of positives that come with this because, so if you were anorexic or orthorexic, when you dive into If It Fits Your Macros, at least you're developing a little bit more comfort with food.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, whatever fits your macros goes. Now, obviously, this can go downhill, which it did for us very quickly.
Real quick. So IIFYM, If It Fits Your Macros, it's basically this strategy of tracking your macronutrient intake, like your carbs, fat, and protein, which is not a bad thing. but we kind of took it to the extreme. And so basically, this strategy kind of doesn't label food as good or bad. You can fit anything into your macros, like including Oreos, as long as you accounted for those carbs and fats in the Oreo.
Yeah. So it's based on like energy, calories is king.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have some sort of weight loss or weight gain goal, you've got a calorie target. Within those calories is your macro targets. No emphasis on micronutrients. And then, yeah, like you were saying, whatever fits your macros goes. So on one end, this is really getting us out of like maybe just our health, fear, food focus.
For sure.
But on the other end, we're now just eating a lot of
processed
foods. Yeah. And so on Instagram, IIFYM was very much glorifying processed foods for the fitness industry. So like your post-workout meal is no longer maybe a protein shake and a banana. It's literally a Pop-Tart with protein goo or something.
Yeah.
So it's taking these fitness-oriented people who were eating the really clean, air quotes, diet and just giving them that freedom and permission to eat junk food.
Yeah.
Because it fits your macros. So there's some good to this, but largely I'd say that it'll lead to one of my next points. But the powerlifting side of things is a really good, again, there's the good and the bad.
Yeah.
So it helps us obviously feel more comfortable in the gym, gain a lot of strength. So before we were just doing more like bodybuilding workouts, right? Mm-hmm. Still not optimizing anything because our nutrition wasn't all there. But with the powerlifting, at least we were starting to eat enough. We were getting stronger, more comfortable in the gym, kind of finding our element. Obviously, we're going to circle back and talk about this to what we think about this today. But I think it served a purpose
for sure.
Our training journey. So I'd say that that's shaped, what was really prevalent in my life and how I spent my time. I learned to love the gym even more than I did. That formed my community through college, prioritizing the gym over partying. There's good and bad there, but it definitely shaped the Strong.Sistas in many ways.
Oh, in so many ways. That's why I have the exact same thing written down for my number 3. So let's just expand a little bit more.
Okay.
So we went through this phase together.
Yes. We had become friends.
And we clumped it together because we started eating this way, IIFYM, if it fits your macros, and doing powerlifting at the same time. Because there was this like growing community on Instagram and it was becoming popular.
Deadlifts and donuts.
Yeah. So a few positives, like you said, if it fits your macros, we finally understood that, hey, you actually have to eat a lot of food. We weren't educated on what the best types of food were, but at least we were eating enough calories finally, Yeah. And the powerlifting side, to me, it gave me a ton of confidence, like building strength in the gym and progressing really instilled a lot of self-confidence for me. And so I think that this was a good phase. Thankfully, it didn't last for a really long time.
Oh my gosh, it did. We powerlifted for like 5 years. Our diet changed throughout this.
Right.
But that shaped the vast majority of our training life.
Yeah, that's true.
We've only now circled back.
Yeah. Yeah, so we really got obsessed with maximizing our 1 rep maxes. So for powerlifting specifically, when you compete, you're trying to lift the most amount of weight for 1 rep for your squat, bench, and your deadlift. And we could have had so much more muscle right now if we would have focused more on other things. But yeah.
Yeah, because you can be the strongest person in the room, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be the biggest.
Yeah.
There's a lot that needs to take place to tear your muscle down and rebuild it to grow size.
Yeah.
whereas powerlifting was a lot of central nervous system adaptation and learning how to be the most efficient with your movements to lift the most amount of weight.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, like so much confidence, and did teach us a lot about using different muscles, doing accessory exercises to grow strength in areas you needed to maximize those 3 lifts. But yeah, perfect 2020 hindsight. As a female, I didn't need to be throwing on a ton of weight on my back and trying to lift it.
I think that we've learned a lot since this phase in terms of what's optimal for muscle building.
I didn't mean to say it that way. Somebody's going to get angry. I think it's great and empowering for a female to throw a lot of weight and lift it.
Yeah.
But for long-term sustainability of my health and what my goals actually have been rooted in this entire time, I would have benefited more from just strictly focusing on building muscle. So performing the movements more effectively.
And this is the approach we take now. It's more of a hypertrophy focused. So
Correct.
Progressing slowly over time in that like 8 to 15 rep range.
Yes.
Where you're providing your muscle with a stimulus and then allowing for plenty of recovery. I think both of us, due to our like 5-ish years in powerlifting, it increased our fight or flight activation. So we were not able to rest and digest as well. It activated our CNS a lot. And I think that it led to a lot of gut problems, exercise-induced endotoxemia. So,
yeah.
Okay. So that was my number 3.
With the processed foods we were eating and the fits your macros with a lot of gut aggregating ingredients.
And that's a recipe for autoimmune conditions.
Yes. So, is it me?
Yeah,
3?
I finished my 1 through 3 because we had the same number 3. Oh, your number 2 was my number 3. Correct. So now we go to your number 3.
Okay, so my number 3, Ashley was in the process of bringing this up, but I wrote diagnosis of disease and then with an arrow pointing to fear, and then in parentheses, fasting, keto, and carnivore. Because I feel like this can be umbrellaed under one thing. Mm-hmm. So in, I think, 2017, we got the autoimmune diagnosis.
So basically, our previous lifestyle kind of finally caught up to us.
Yeah, I'd say. So diagnosis of autoimmune just based on blood work, so the elevated ANA levels, and then what this kind of snowballed into with regards to how we treated our health and our diet and lifestyle. So,
well, what happened at the doctor?
Right. At the doctor, of course. So, rheumatologist for autoimmune. Obviously, the suggestion was just to take prescription medications as a precaution and to slow down the progression of disease. And so, luckily for us, our mom was more holistic in nature and wasn't pro just taking a random drug. So, this kind of shaped where we went next. But Ashley and I don't even know what like the first snowball was, but I started to get into more like naturopathic medicine and wanting to go through that route to try to like fix myself. And then obviously this led us to doing more of the intermittent fasting after different influences on social media. And then of course that always snowballs into keto, which then snowballed into carnivore.
But I think that rheumatologist appointment truly was a major point in your life and my life, because we saw mainstream medicine for the first time just basically say, this is your diagnosis. You are going to have this for the rest of your life. all you can do is manage symptoms with this prescription. Here's your prescription. Go to Walgreens and get it filled out. That was like our first exposure. And that really shaped like, oh, no, I'm going to take my health into my own hands. And then again, follows a series of mistakes because we never developed that understanding of human physiology.
Definitely.
We could have skipped all of this if Velocity Sports Performance and some fitness Instagram influencer back when we were age 14 talked about human physiology and these things. Yeah. We could have skipped all of this.
It's so funny to me. You're 100% right. And I think the word that stuck in my head when you were saying that is just fear. Because being diagnosed with something is really scary. And I think doing things like fasting, keto, and carnivore in many ways is rooted in fear.
That's a great point.
You're living and dieting or whatever, however you want to say it, out of this fear-based mindset of reductionist, less, I can't introduce anything that's going to aggravate my body or cause inflammation, as opposed to truly understanding how the body works and purpose food serves in your life.
Symptom suppression versus like actually giving the body what it needs.
Definitely. Yeah.
Wow. The fear-based.
Yeah, that's why I put it all as one.
Okay.
Being diagnosed with something scary, and then living and eating and acting out of fear is what led us to do those extreme diets.
Yeah. I want to say that our first exposure was like the intermittent fasting. So we started doing the 16-8.
Yeah.
And then that naturally led to keto. Naturally. Oh, too many carbs still. The problem is carbs. Get rid of all of them. Carnivore.
Yeah, but a lot of this still rooted in a very eating disordered mindset.
Yeah.
Because I think that fasting and then eventually doing the OMAD, so 1 meal a day, was so attractive to us because we went so many years of being very hungry that the idea of eating a ton of food at once was incredible.
Yeah, eating like 2,700 calories in 1 or 2 sittings. Short window.
Yeah, if you were eating that much at that time. But
oh, I was through suet. So I just put carnivore as my number 4, like just carnivore.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. I think we can.
Because to me, like keto and fasting phase, like it kind of got lumped into that time, like you said. And so I just put carnivore as number 4.
Okay. Definitely.
But I viewed we just touched on the negatives, but I wrote it down as a positive because that's how I learned about regenerative agriculture. And that has like truly shaped my life decisions. So we were plant-based somewhere along our keto and fasting journey. Because again, out of fear, we thought that was going to fix the autoimmune condition. And so when we switched to carnivore, I remember we really wanted to source our meat ethically because we were very concerned about animals, how they're treated in the environment. And that's how we stumbled upon regenerative agriculture because we were like, oh, wow, like we can go visit all these local farms that can sell us this meat from animals raised regeneratively who are treated humanely. So there were so many negatives to our health from the carnivore journey, but my biggest positive was finding regenerative agriculture through that.
I think there were a lot of positives to our health too. I think
finally getting retinol in our life.
The bioavailable nutrients.
Yeah.
We weren't really eating meat before.
Yeah.
And I guess for the first time, kind of doing something positive for our guts, just giving them a chance to rest and heal because we stopped eating aggravating foods, which I think is like the most prevalent argument for carnivore is like, oh, it's just the greatest elimination diet. You're giving your body a break. But I think that the metabolic effects of carnivore, especially long term, like we did it a full year.
Yeah.
And that's coming after already eating low carb for over a full year.
Yeah.
That was just too much.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was my number 4, was the carnivore diet, which helped us find regenerative agriculture, which shaped how we viewed food sourcing, and it shaped our future careers. Like now we're first generation farmers because of that. And I don't think we would be here today without that carnivore diet journey, that time point.
Definitely.
Like we wouldn't be on this farm without that.
Yeah. I have a vivid memory of you got blood work back on carnivore that showed that you didn't have the autoimmune markers anymore. Mm-hmm. So I think that was really exciting. And it showed for the first time that the food that we are eating or the food that we're not eating really does have an impact on your health.
And that gut health is kind of everything.
Yeah. And so even though your thyroid markers were atrocious, you still didn't have optimal hormones. And there was a lot of evidence of a pretty sluggish metabolism. It was cool to see that still.
That's a great point. I think, like you said, there are definitely some positives, like bioavailable nutrients, your connection to your farmer and your food source, and the complete elimination of anything that can irritate the gut, because animal foods are the most nutrient dense, bioavailable, least harmful to the gut.
I think if I could do carnivore over, I would probably just be drinking milk.
Yeah.
And then having liver and stuff. But
would probably be fine.
Yeah.
I'm just going to drink milk and then liver every once in a while.
And some animal-based honey.
Okay, so that was my 4. So what's your number 4?
Okay. So my number 4 is mold exposure and developing an understanding that external influences can really affect your health. So after carnivore, we started moving more towards the pro-metabolic food ideas. We still didn't have a good understanding of human physiology, but this kind of took us there, this transition, because we started learning more about hormones, how to get our periods. And I think that's all like rooted in the pro-metabolic world. It's just large emphasis on optimizing your hormones and thyroid function and so on. So while doing all of this and seeing so many positive things take place in my health and the way I was feeling, and then us moving into our farmhouse, which was over 100 years old, and we didn't know at the time had a lot of toxic mold, seeing my health just go 100% backwards out of nowhere. I hadn't changed anything in my diet or my lifestyle. It was so just like an out-of-body experience. Yeah. Because so much of it was psychological, because I was so scared again. Yeah. Even though I just, spent the whole year prior feeling really good and free with my food choices and my health and feeling very empowered. But then having all of that taken from me was so weird.
Yeah, so after carnivore, we moved to the farmhouse, and during this time switched to pro-metabolic. So we added carbohydrates, and I remember Sarah feeling so much better, getting her period back, and then all of a sudden taking 2 steps backwards with her health without changing anything. And so I think that the summary there is there's more to health than food. Like the environment that you live in is important.
Yeah. And I think just it's very clear from what we've talked about that we put ourselves through a lot in our adolescent period and even in our early 20s. So possibly if I had lived all those years differently, my body would have responded differently to the mold and such a very concentrated environmental toxin. Like maybe I would have been more resilient. But I hadn't built up that resilience yet, which is possibly or definitely why I had such a negative reaction to the mold. Obviously, my body was not equipped or well suited to detoxify itself, which we know is a metabolic process.
Well, I think that it's important to clarify that like you were still healing. And so then like coming out of the thyroid suppressed, metabolism suppressed state that we were in carnivore, and then just bam, like push back down, like environmental toxins overloaded. So like everyone's stress bucket is different. And that mold was enough to tip you over.
Yep. So that's my number 4 was just an awareness of my environment like I'd never had before.
Okay.
How about you?
Well, I'm on 5 now.
Oh, wow.
And so mine was right at the end of the carnivore diet experience. So it's kind of between carnivore and mold exposure when we had this like switch, like carnivore fasting felt great until it didn't. Like there was this switch where thyroid levels super low T3, my cholesterol was out of this world. I was at 600 cholesterol. Sarah was at 700 cholesterol. Our hair was falling out. We had no libido. We were simply just surviving and symptom suppressing at that point. And it was like we had to change something. And Sarah found the work of Dr. Ray Peat and Pro-metabolic. And she was like, Ashley, we need to add carbs back in. And it was like such a monumental shift because our view of health was challenged at that point. And I think we finally realized, hey, the body is a system and the state that the body is in impacts how all the parts function. And at that point we were like, our system isn't working. We have to change it. Our thyroid and metabolism is suppressed and therefore we aren't healthy.
Yeah.
And so I think that was my number 5 because that was like, if we would have understood the importance of thyroid, metabolism, and hormones from day one, we wouldn't have developed this fear like you talked about, and we wouldn't have felt susceptible to all these fads along the way. We could have avoided these big holes that we dug ourselves in. So that was my number 5, is recognizing the importance of the state of the body as a system.
Yes. That's so funny. I just have to read you my number 5.
Okay. What's your number 5?
Number 5 is, quote, think, perceive, act. So Dr. Pete's work in understanding the body as one large system as opposed to multi-organ functioning separately.
In honor of Dr. Ray Peat.
So I definitely think we've come full circle to the same place.
Yeah.
And
I could start crying right now.
I just wish, because you said that had we had this understanding of the metabolism from day one, we could have just bypassed all of these 1, 2, 3, 4
series of unfortunate events.
Yeah. And gosh, it all could have been solved by having something like this taught in school or taught
velocity sports performance.
Right, like they should have been teaching you this, which I would of curious to go back and see like what their curriculum actually was. Maybe you just weren't receptive to some of the ideas because of prior beliefs you had.
No. I remember my flip in food choices. Like
Okay.
I would eat pretzels before that, and
No
then
pretzels.
after Velocity Sports Performance, no pretzels
are
allowed.
No. No way. And then if it's true macros, pretzels are go.
Right, exactly.
Carnivore pretzels are no.
Dr. Pete, are those sourdough? Did you eat enough calcium to balance the phosphorus in those grains?
Wow. Yeah, and I think even after the mold experience, like I said, that was largely psychological. And I think that mold and mycotoxins are neurotoxic. So it does have a lot of impacts on your physiology, but also the different hormones and everything that's happening. So it leaves you in a very high serotonin state, which I think is just such an important idea or concept within Dr. Ray Peat's work, is getting out of learned helplessness and adapting or adopting the idea of think, perceived, act, and what that means for your life and your health, and the power that gives you. That alone is enough to change somebody's life without literally changing anything about their food, because suddenly the way we're thinking about our health and our life has changed, and that will change your physiology.
Yeah. Dr. Ray Peat has clearly had a huge impact on our life. And I think moving forward, that will become very evident in our podcast episodes. We'll be referencing a lot of his work, because I do not believe that we achieved health until we found the work of Dr. Ray Peat.
No. And what's frustrating to me is so there's all these diet camps. So there's keto, carnivore, and obviously people still very prevalent in the keto and carnivore world don't agree with or like or appreciate Dr. Ray Peat's work. And they see all these people go from keto and carnivore to more pro-metabolic. And so they're like, oh, of course. And like they talk about all the negatives, and they have this preconceived idea of what the Dr. Ray Peat diet looks like. But I just want to be very clear that there's no Dr. Ray Peat diet.
Yeah.
And so if you've heard all these negative things about Dr. Ray Peat is just eating ice cream, Mexican Cokes, and cane sugar, no. There's so much to be learned. Is that a right phrase? To be learned.
To be learned.
To be learned from his work.
Yeah.
Like I tried touching on it about the learned helplessness, and
there's no way we're going to cover it here.
No, but
that's future episodes.
Because I just know that so much of our audience is still, more in the
hamster wheel
mindset. Yeah. That one doesn't just become this like Ray Peter.
No.
It's not a thing.
No.
It is, he provides you with that education that you never had before about your body. So now you can make informed decisions about your food and your lifestyle, as opposed to making decisions out of fear.
Basically, when you learn about physiology and the importance of thyroid and metabolism, you empower yourself to make decisions for yourself, rather than listening to these random gurus online who are just like regurgitating the same punchlines over and over. And so it becomes ingrained in your head. And so it's not actually deep understanding human physiology. It's just memorizing one-liners. Sugar is toxic, etc. Like those type of things. And so rather than understanding, wait, what's the mechanism for how sugar is toxic? It's not. Sugar isn't toxic. But yeah, we just owe so much gratitude to Dr. Ray Peat, because at that point in my life, I feel like I was able to dig out of my hole of 20 years. And it's important to understand that we did this all to ourselves. Like, we were given so many opportunities in life, but because we didn't have the foundation of education in what true nourishment and metabolic health meant, we weren't able to make the best decisions for ourselves.
Yeah, definitely. And the process of you climbing out of that hole, just to be crystal clear, was very challenging.
Oh, it took an incredibly long time. And I'm not, no one has perfect health, but I see the outer world. I'm not deep in the hole.
Exactly. I just think it's important to people understand who might be going through this journey that sometimes it can get worse before it gets better. But you have to understand and maybe take time to write these 5 points down so you can fully grasp all the shit you put yourself through, to know that you have to have some patience now for your body to rewire itself.
Well, I'm going to talk about myself. I put myself through so much shit for so long that I had to give myself so much time, so much patience. And I still give myself that patience as I'm working on fully getting out of that hole. But it's so freeing to see the outside world and not base decisions on fear and base decisions on understanding. It's really nice.
I think that's going to be largely what our podcast is about. Is this climbing out of a hole, seeing the world, kind of maybe what the most important realizations have been.
Yeah, digging into some of these stops along our journey a little bit more.
Oh, yes, definitely. But also how to apply Dr. Ray Peat's work, maybe, and what that actually looks like.
Yeah, Danny Roddy has said on a number of his podcasts that we all now have a responsibility and a duty to carry on Dr. Peat's work. So we hope we provide a nice feminism perspective on it.
And beyond his work too, just
for sure.
Life and
regenerative agriculture and So it will be a lot of us talking, and then we will have occasional guests on as well. I think one of our first guests is going to be Georgie Dinkov. So stay tuned.
I'm excited. How do you think that went?
I hope it went well. I liked your idea of the 5 things. And I think that would be a great practice for someone else to write down 5 really influential things in their life that have really shaped how they view health. But okay, let's wrap up with where you can find us. So we're on Instagram at Strong.Sistas. And if you want to follow our farm, it's at Angel__acres. Check out our website. We've got a ton of freebies, so free downloads, and our courses like Rooted in Resilience and our exercise course, Strong Training. Our website's www.Armstrong.Sistas.com. And you can sign up for our newsletter there, where we send email newsletters every Sunday morning, and we switch off. So next Sunday is Sarah, and then I'm the following Sunday.
Cool. I'm so excited. We've been wanting to do this for a long time.
Yes.
We couldn't figure out the technological side of it. And so the morale was so low starting this, because we were like, oh my God.
There's still echo.
Iteration of mic, camera, computer.
Plug-in, cord.
So we're excited. We'll get better at this.
What do you want to leave everyone with, Sarah?
Since I've already brought it up, I'll just leave everybody with the repeat quote of think, perceive, act, and whatever that means to you. Really, that you are in control. And you have the power.
Okay.
How about you?
I think that education is foundational and empowering and living, because when you are empowered with how things work, there's so much less fear. And life, you aren't living, you aren't thriving when you're living in fear. Okay?
Everything that we see on social media is like embedded in fear because fear sells.
Absolutely.
So having that understanding is important.
For sure. All right. Well, that's all today, folks. We'll chat with you guys next time.
Bye. I don't know how to sign off.